Hello and welcome to our review of the Changan, the CS75. You see it there behind me. It's sort of a crossover. It's front wheel drive, looks like an SUV, fits into sort of, I would say, the CRV, slightly bigger segment there. It is in fact our first test of a Chinese car for me and for Motoring Middle East. So what do we make of it? Well, I'll tell you what, let me take you on a walk around first and then we'll get inside it. Now there's obviously a lot of talk and discussion about how the Chinese copy other manufacturers and their designs. Well, with this one, I think what seems to have happened is that they had a lot of tracing paper of different designs and it all kind of got shuffled up and mixed up and they came out with this car, because I think there's a lot of influences of a lot of different cars in this one. I mean, that if I zoom into this grille, for example, that treatment is very much Range Rover. But if I zoom back like that, there's a hint of a GMC in there. Those headlights are very Volkswagen. If I come to the sides a little bit, there's a hint of BMW X5, X3 maybe. You move along there and, especially when you look towards the back of the car, there's a hint of maybe Jeep, Grand Cherokee there. And, coming to the rear, there are more influences of other cars as well. I have to say though, cheap though they might be, the overall effect of all of these different styling cues isn't too bad. Maybe it's because of the black color of this car that sort of hides some of its lines, and also those quite funky black wheels that they've put on it to give it a little bit of a moody menace. Gives it a little bit more appeal, I suppose. But overall it's not too bad. One thing I'll tell you, I was expecting this car to be cut up left, right and center in traffic. I have to say it's getting a little bit more respect than I thought it would, and that's probably because people are totally confused as to what it is. So of course one of the key considerations of a car like this, which of course is a value product, is the practicality. So let's start by looking at the boot. Quite a large tail opening there, as you can see, and the boot itself very, very spacious, actually very handy, very practical. If I can just move back a little bit and then move in closer, and there's lots of clever touches. So there's these little pockets on each side, that side and that side. There is a light and a power supply. Under here, you pull these off and you've got quite a deep bin down there. And in fact, there's another one on the other side as well. Now, under here, there's yet more space. Obviously, they've got a full-size spare tire, but as you can see, space for a fire extinguisher, your triangle. You could put some gubbins into the middle of that as well. And there's the access to the other bin over there. So, and of course, needless to say, split folding rear seats, and the rear seat backs themselves can be adjusted into a recline position, as you can see I've done there. In fact, let's get into the back. Well, look at the amount of space that I have here. Got plenty of headroom, decent elbow room, lots of space for my knees, look, you can see, and again for my feet as well, not an issue at all down there. In fact, the seats are a little bit, somebody sat in the seat over here and they said it was very, very upright backrest, as you can see, but as I mentioned, you can recline the seats and that actually improves things quite a bit. Now, you have, of course, your center armrest, and it has two cup holders. Down there, quite handy, you got two AC vents, and you have a power supply plus little pocket there as well to put stuff. No pockets in the seat backs unusually. That's a little bit unusual, yeah. But otherwise, not a lot back here, as you would expect. It's a cheap car, but where it counts, it's practical and it's comfortable-ish, and plenty of space. Right. Let's get a look at the features in the front of this thing. So here we are inside the front of the Changan. Geely floor mats for some reason. And I don't mean the wet kind. Right, hot day again, so let's turn it on. It's got a starter button, look. So it's quite well equipped, this car, if you think about it. Look how it starts up there on the screen. It's got a digital center panel, and of course it has a touchscreen center panel here. So press agree, and then you get all your things. If I go into main, oh look, the stereo comes straight on. Actually, it's got pretty good stereo. Got 8 speakers in this thing. Not bad at all. Bluetooth's up. It's a little bit of a primitive Bluetooth system. You have to put codes and stuff in there. But once you're in, the hands-free works very well, and the stereo works very well as well. Then you have a number of settings in here, and you've even got, so these are settings for the region. If I press tone, it's quite interesting because you've even got pop and what is it? Pop and rock and all of those things. Classical, you know, jazz, voice, normal, custom. So that's pretty good, and you can adjust all your stuff from there. Image, for some reason you've got image settings in there, but you know, most of the stuff is pretty straightforward. So radio, USB and stuff like that. It does have a USB down here, if you can make out. It's got a power supply, a lighter, and an aux and a USB in there. Now for some reason that USB wasn't actually charging my iPhone. It was connecting my iPhone, but it wasn't charging, which kind of makes it a little bit redundant if that doesn't work. I hope that's just a fault. This is the AC climate control, and actually one of the pluses, along with the stereo, one of the pluses of this car, because you know, when I first got into this car, the first time I drove it, I whacked that right up because I thought, oh, you know what, that's going to struggle, it's going to be a bit of a wimpy system. But actually no, it got so cold I had to keep turning it down because it was actually very, very cold in here. You don't get a handbrake, you actually get an electronic brake here. Look, that's quite something. An e-brake. You get a normal shifter, it's a 6-speed, 2 cup holders down here, and a double shelf for the cubby box. So there's one pocket and then another deeper one down there. Leather seats on this top of the range model, of course, with red stitching. Check it out, you know. What do you make of the interior? I mean, the styling is familiar, you know. It's very derivative of other designs, and you know, some of the plastics do feel a bit cheap and not very well you know, put together. You know, this is quite interesting. I'll put my iPhone down there, and it kind of, if you can make out from there, yeah, you can make out from there. I'll put my iPhone in there, and it then flew out through there straight into the passenger footwell. But you know what, it's not offensive. Here we've got cruise control. It's got cruise control, it's got remotes on the steering wheel, so you get all of that. So you got your buttons over here. This is for the center bit there, as you can see. Not a lot to it really. You don't even get a digital speedometer, but you know what, it's basic and it's simple and it works. There's your you know, controls for the stereo, your hands-free, and all the rest of it. Traction control button, I don't know if you can see that. There you go. Traction control button, adjusting your headlights and interior lighting, and that sort of stuff. Again, very familiar controls for the seats, doors and stuff like that. Now what else can I tell you about this car, because you know, it is something that's quite unusual, and I have here a brochure spec from here, and it's driving forward with you. Well, it's better than driving forward without you, because that would make it autonomous, which is probably what they're cooking up next, actually, let's be honest. One of the lines I quite like in this brochure, I was just having a flick through it earlier, and it's kind of, you know, there's a little bit of humility here, I think. I don't know if it's tongue-in-cheek or what, but, you know, so most brochures are pretty bombastic about, you know, their product. And in this one, it says in the last sentence, I don't know if you can make that out, but in the last sentence, let me try and refocus for you. In the last sentence, it says, "What we have been trying to achieve is to provide you with a good-looking, reliable, and safe mid-size premium SUV." They've been trying, you know. Give them a chance. They've been trying, you know. So have they succeeded? Well, you know, possibly, and this is coming from a skeptic on Chinese cars. Now, we shouldn't really dismiss this company, this Changan company, because apparently this is the biggest automotive company that you and I never heard of, you know, if you go down this spec. But before we do that, let me just give you the price. So this top-of-the-range car that we're in, 60,000 dirhams. So that's not too bad at all. I haven't converted it to dollars. I'll put that on the screen later on. And it starts at a more basic spec level, and that's at just 50,000 dirhams. So for 50,000 dirhams, you get pretty much an SUV. Remember, front-wheel drive, not four-wheel drive. But in that, included in that, is 1 year's free insurance and 3-year service contract as well. So that's pretty handy. Sold by Union Motors, as you can see. Now, about the Changan itself. Now, I don't even know if I'm pronouncing that right. I don't know if it's Changan. I like Changan, so I'm going to call it Changan. So, you know, if it's wrong, correct me. But, you know, I don't really care. And, you know, this manufacturer has got a 54-year legacy building military vehicles, you know, stuff like that. It's been building cars since 1958, amazingly. It's one of the top 4 Chinese automotive brands. #1 for sales among self-owned Chinese cars. China's first and only brand that produced and sold over 10 million vehicles. #1 in the Chinese #1 Chinese brand in terms of sales for 8 consecutive years. #14 worldwide, and they sold 1 million, more than 1 million cars in 2015. I mean, wow. I mean, you know, and this car apparently has a 5-star NCAP safety rating. You know, it's got airbags and stuff like that. I noticed also in the back it does have ISOFIX child seat anchor points, so that's quite handy as well. Presence in 60 countries, and it's growing. It's in Saudi, it's in UAE, and it's in Kuwait, so it's available in all of these places now. And yeah, massive company, really. Now, a little bit about this car in particular. So we get a 1.8 engine. I don't know if you can make that out at all. It's a bit, I've got it, it's all in shadows, I'm afraid. I'll just read it to you, yeah. So we got a 1.8 liter, it's called a Blue Core turbo engine, puts out about 175 brake horsepower. We do have front and rear disc brakes, and we've got McPherson independent suspension, rear multi-link independent. We've also got electronic power steering. So, and the tire size is 17-inch wheels on this, 225/65s. And again, going back to the safety, it's got all the traction control, ESP, EBD, all of that stuff, all of the stability programs and all the rest of it. Dual front and side curtain airbags, and of course the seat belts and all the rest of it. So that's about as much as I can tell you in terms of factual information. I suppose the best thing to do now is to just take it for a little bit of a drive. But you know, the drive is not really the strong feature of this car. It drives. Let's say that, you know. I mean, with 175 horsepower, what are you really expecting from this 1.8T? Now, there is a 2 liter apparently. I don't know if it's sold in this market or other markets, but don't be tempted to say, oh, I want the 2 liter, because in fact, it's got less power, bizarrely, 158. No, so go for the 1.8 turbo. That's the one to go for. But having said that, we are not talking, I mean, look, you know, it takes a while for the engine to get going, and then for the gearbox to go, oh, I need to kick down and accelerate off into the distance. And that will take a little bit of a while. You know, I haven't done a 0 to 100. They haven't quoted a 0 to 100. They have quoted a fuel consumption. I think that's about 8 liters per 100, which is very good. I would be guesstimating at a 0 to 100 time of maybe 13-14 seconds. Honestly speaking, that's what I think it would do. Now, having said all of that, I mean, the point of a car like this is that it's cheap, economical, and practical, and reasonably, I mean, the main selling point of this car is all the kit and the comfort and all the stuff that you get here, and you do get a lot of very cool stuff. In terms of the drive, I mean, the ride is not too bad at all. I have to give it that much. It's just that when you, on a smooth surface it's fine, but when you come to a speed bump or something, you do tend to feel that vibration and that jolt through the cabin somewhat a little more than you normally would. Now, the brakes, however, I could definitely have a little bit of a moan about, because they're not very progressive. So what happens is that you're on the brake and you're pushing and you're pushing and you're pushing, and really it's at the last minute that it sort of turns into a switch. And that's where you actually get most of your braking effort. The steering, you know, it turns and it's fine. I mean, don't even think of this as something that you're going to be chucking around enthusiastically or whatever. The body, there's body roll, there's body movement. Like I said, I put my phone down there, executed a left turn, and the phone just flew out of the pocket because of that amount of body lean. So, like I said, I mean, these are not really considerations for this car. Now, what do I think of this? As I've always been a cynic of Chinese cars, and with good reason. You know, six or 7 years ago, we first had one in the office. My deputy editor got a Chinese car, and I thought, you know what, I better just go down and just give it a little try, you know, just to familiarize myself with, you know, Chinese cars. And people have been saying the Chinese cars are going to catch up with the Japanese, you know, within, you know, 5 years. I've been hearing that for the last 15 years, honestly. So I went downstairs, I grabbed the door, I opened it, and it felt like it was just going to come off in my hand. I looked at the interior, and it just felt like the dashboard was just going to fall down. The plastics were cheap. It just was terrible. And you know what? I closed the door, went back upstairs, and said, nah, I'm not driving that. That's terrible. I just don't want to drive it. So much for that. So much for that. That was the end of that. But there, you see what I mean about the speed bump. You really get a jolt through the system when that happens. So, fast forwarding today in 2016, at the end of 2016, looking at this, essentially, I suppose, for our market, a 2017 model, or I think it's probably still a 2016 model Changan. And what it puts me in mind of, actually, is Korean cars from about 5 years ago. where basically they were loading their cars up with kit and comfort and practicality and leaving the engineering side and the styling a little bit to chance. And that's where I think this car is at now. So it's a good value proposition. In closing, what I would say is that I honestly was expecting to hate this car. Let's be honest. I was expecting to outright, utterly hate this car. That's not the case. And I think that's actually a major achievement when it comes to Chinese cars. That I didn't end up hating it. I don't want one. Look at the understeer on this thing. I don't want one. And let's just run around about slow speed. I don't want one. But I can understand people that might want to go for it. Because you know what? At the money, in terms of the practicality, it kind of makes sense. It kind of does. So there you go. That's our review and verdict on our first ever test of a Chinese car, in this case the Changan CS75. And let us know what you think both of the review and of this car in the comments and elsewhere. Do please check out the full review on motoringme.com and find us on all social media. Search for us on Facebook, Instagram and Twitter. Just type in Motoring Middle East. And if you're watching on YouTube, which you can find us the same way by searching Motoring Middle East, then please do like, share and subscribe. You can also follow me on Instagram, Twitter and Snapchat, Shahzad Sheikh or Shahzad_Sheikh when it comes to Twitter and Snapchat. Thanks so much for watching. Until the next one.